What's going on, guys? Hey, we are back, man, and this is going to be a different kind of video. I'm excited about this. We're going to be diving into the more of the human trafficking aspect of the Russians and how it is aiding their war in Ukraine. So this is a brand new channel to us. It's called Into the Shadows. I will tag them in the description and in the title of this video. And it says, why is the screen all off center? And the title is Russia using human trafficking to feed its war in Ukraine? Now, we already know Russia has been human trafficking Ukrainians for years at this point. Over 30,000 Ukrainian children are still missing. Now, I believe that's a separate topic from what we're talking about in this video, but still, it's trafficking, and it just again goes to prove how much of dirtballs this country can be. So, first of all, please go check out this channel. Second of all, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel here, Different Breed TV. Grab a t-shirt if you want one. We've got the Flamingos over Moscow, and we've also got our 4th of July t-shirts, American for Ukraine. And we've got our Discord link in the description with all our uncensored footage as well. All right, guys, let's jump into this. I'm excited.
When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 20...
Sorry. Let me go ahead and make myself a little itty bitty.
2022, the Kremlin expected to defeat Ukraine within a matter of days. Instead, what was supposed to be a swift military operation has since turned into one of the bloodiest and most expensive wars in modern European history. Russia has lost thousands of military vehicles and aircraft, and its war casualties are estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands. But despite implementing an expansive information campaign with the goal of convincing its populace that Russian victory is inevitable, the Kremlin has been unable to recruit the soldiers it reportedly needs to sustain its war machine. So, since 2022, they've been actively recruiting soldiers from the Middle East, Asia, and Africa to support their war effort. However, multiple sources have since reported that many of these men hadn't signed up willingly. They'd been promised well-paying jobs, scholarships, and the chance to build a better future. Instead, they found themselves fighting on the front lines of one of the deadliest conflicts of the 21st century. When Russia launched its attack on Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022, it focused on attacking several fronts simultaneously: Kyiv, Kharkiv, Donbass, and Crimea. The plan was to take over Hostomel Airport and use it as an air bridge that would enable them to seize Kyiv, but the Ukrainian military destroyed the airfield. Since Russia could no longer use it,
We've watched a couple specials on the Hostomel Airport attack and the Battle of Kyiv, man. Those fights are going to be in the history books right now. They're already being written into history books. Very cool stuff.
They were forced to retreat and abort their attack on Kyiv, leaving thousands of Russian soldiers stranded on enemy soil. Within a few days, it was clear that the Ukrainians were more than capable of resisting Russia's onslaught. Russia had initially deployed 190,000 soldiers to fight in the war, but they suffered heavy losses within the first few months. The Kremlin increasingly started depending on the Wagner Group and other private militaries to fight its war. And on the 11th of March 2022, Vladimir Putin announced that as many as 16,000 volunteers from the Middle East were en route to Ukraine to help with the war effort. It was thought that the majority of these volunteers were Syrian fighters who already had the skills necessary to fight an urban war due to the prolonged civil war in their country. The Kremlin reportedly believed these Syrian soldiers would be able to help them take Kyiv. The Wagner Group also started enlisting mercenaries and male prisoners into their ranks in an effort to boost their numbers. But on the 21st of September 2022, Vladimir Putin was forced to announce a partial mobilization, declaring that 300,000 military reservists would be called up to replenish their forces in Ukraine. Known locally as the Mobiki, they received little to no military training and were provided with substandard gear and uniforms, and not long after they were first sent to the front lines, their regiments reported suffering heavy losses. Surprise, surprise. The decision to call up 300,000 Russian citizens to fight in the Russian-Ukrainian war proved to be massively unpopular. Again, surprise, had resulted in several violent protests taking place all over Russia, with protesters specifically targeting enlistment officers. It also led to the mass emigration of hundreds of thousands of skilled and educated young men who wanted to avoid being conscripted into the army. In an effort to entice their citizens into enlisting, the Kremlin started offering one-off sign-up bonuses of up to 2,000 euros and promising these men a monthly salary of up to 2,100 euros a month if they agreed to sign a one-year contract, serve in the Russian army, and become kontraktniki. And in a country where the national average income is just €800, quote, it became possible for contract soldiers to earn as much in 1 year in the army as in several years in a civilian job. The Kremlin then went even further by promising its citizens a death benefit at up to €50,000 in the event of their death, or a €30,000 disability benefit. Prisoners who agreed to enlist would also have their sentences reduced or qualify to be pardoned if they proved eligible for military honors. In their June 2024 report titled How Russia is Recruiting for the Long War, Margaret Klein from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs explains that these one-year contracts can't be cancelled and will automatically be renewed at the end of the one-year period. Quoting, Putin stipulated in the partial mobilization decree of September 2022 that the contracts of all contractniki are to remain valid until the end of the war in Ukraine or the special military operation. This means that de facto there is a permanent mobilization underway, not only of the Mabiki, but also of the contractniki.
And that's also the case with Ukraine, or at least it was early on, like they're saying it was for Russia. But the difference is the Ukrainians would, there's like break clauses, right? So you could serve X amount of time and then break a contract. With the Russian contracts, number one, nobody was making it that long. Nobody was serving a contract that long. Number two, if they did, they weren't getting out, dude.
December 2022, they announced that they wanted to enlist at least 295,000 new contract soldiers, but due to the unpopularity of their partial mobilization efforts, the Kremlin struggled to recruit the required number of civilians needed to sustain their military operation in Ukraine, so they started inviting foreign volunteers to fight on behalf of Russia. In 2024, Russia also entered talks with North Korea. On the 18th of June 2024, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un signed the Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between the Russian Federation and the DPRK, which included a requirement that both countries would, quote, provide military and other assistance with all means in its possession without delay, should either country be put in a state of war by an armed invasion. This led to North Korea sending approximately 14,000 soldiers to Ukraine in October 2024 to assist Russia with its war effort. The federal laws that limited the number of foreign men who could fight on behalf of Russia were also adapted to ensure the Kremlin would be able to meet its targets.
In my opinion, when this happened, it was the most overlooked and underreported situation in modern history. The fact that North Korea put so many boots on the ground in Russia and deliberately used these soldiers as combat troops against Ukraine, and NATO did fuck all about it, I think is one of, again, it's one of the most underreported, biggest situations that's happened in my lifetime. And it was a huge egg on the face for Western countries. Basically, the bad actors of the world were able to show the entire world that the West will not help. They will not come to your aid. They will send you money. They will send you supplies from the sidelines. But if we bring in troops from other countries, the West will not do the same.
Targets. Before the war, foreign nationals who wanted to join the Russian army had to be under the age of 30, have an understanding of the Russian language, and agree to sign up for a period of...
And I already see the comments coming about what I just said. And the solution to that, in my opinion, would have been the second that we got word the North Koreans were heading to Russia, we've got French soldiers, Americans, British, German, Polish, everybody loaded up and ready to rock straight to Ukraine. So the precedent is set that if Russia tries to escalate this by bringing another country's military into this war, the free world will stomp that out immediately. Even if all these soldiers I just mentioned from these different countries weren't put in combat roles, but they were put in different areas of Ukraine to help with logistics, supplies, blah, 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 that would have set the precedent that we're not taking this shit. You can't do that, Russia. But no, we just said, and then let's just not talk about it for a while. Everybody don't look and don't believe what you're seeing.
5 years if they wanted Russian citizenship. Now they could be up to 65 years old, were told they only had to serve for a year, and were no longer required to have a basic understanding of Russian. As of June 2026, it's estimated that Russia has recruited more than 42,000 soldiers from more than 135 countries to fight on its behalf. However, in 2024, Ukrainian authorities started reporting that not all of the foreign nationals who ended up enlisting to fight in Russia's army seemed to have known what they were signing up for, prompting accusations that the Kremlin's recruitment practices resembled tactics commonly associated with human traffickers. According to the Foreign Policy Research Institute, quote, the United Nations defines human trafficking as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception with the aim of exploiting them for profit, often using fraudulent employment agencies and fake promises of education and job opportunities to trick and coerce victims. According to the Ukrainian government's project, I Want to Live, Russia's foreign recruits are mostly from countries like Cuba and the former Soviet republics like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Belarus, and Kyrgyzstan. However, they're also being recruited from several countries in Central and South Asia, South America, and Africa. In February 2026, Ukrainian intelligence reported that Russia is planning to recruit another 18,500 foreign nationals by the end of 2026. And even though some of them are ideologically motivated volunteers with prior military experience who seem to have willingly signed up to fight on behalf of Russia, Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs reports that the majority of these recruits are from socially, economically, and legally vulnerable populations who had accepted jobs in Russia hoping to escape extreme poverty, but had no idea they'd signed up to join Russia's military. Migrants from countries like Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan reported that they'd moved to Russia to find better work opportunities. When they arrived at the border, they were presented with a stack of documents that they had to sign. They claim immigration officials rushed them through signing, and once they were done, they were taken to a holding facility and told that they'd just joined Russia's military. Others have been living and working in Russia for a while, but were detained by Russian police on various criminal charges or as a result of systematic discrimination and legal loopholes. According to truthhounds.org, quote, from 2022 onwards, raids on migrant residences, workplaces, and mosques increased sharply, with the signing of a military contract presented as an alternative to deportation, criminal prosecution, or continued detention. Lawyers representing these migrants report that once they were in police custody, they were kept in overcrowded cells and beaten and tortured with stun guns on a daily basis. Some were told that if they wanted the beatings to stop, they had to agree to join the army. Others were told that they'd already signed a contract and had no choice but to go to the front lines, or they would be killed. According to Truthhounds, these methods resulted in the number of foreign nationals rising from just over 3,800 in 2023 to more than 14,000 in 2025. According to a human rights lawyer representing a recruit from Latin America, quote, they pointed a gun to his head and said, if you don't sign, you're dead. That's what most of the victims say. Some of these men have told journalists from the BBC and other media outlets that they'd already been working in Russia for some time and had heard that the Kremlin would pay them $20,000 in exchange for signing up to join the military. Some of them happily agreed, since such a large amount of money would secure their family's future, and the offer was accompanied by the promise of Russian citizenship. Others were under the impression that they'd signed up to work as engineers, mechanics, security personnel, or technicians in drone factories, and then found themselves being sent to training camps.
Right, which is all stuff that we've talked about on this channel, we've seen, which should be no surprise to anybody. Russia's a bad actor. They do bad stuff. Surprise, surprise, right? Unfortunately, from some of these countries that have a less educated population statistically, Russia's able to victimize and take advantage of these populations,
where they were told they were being sent to the front,
including their own
lines. Russian recruiters have also relied on a combination of transnational networks, independent agents, and social media influencers to recruit foreign nationals from several countries in Africa. These independent agents would post job offerings as drivers, cleaners, and security guards on social media networks such as Telegram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook, promising potential job seekers lucrative opportunities in Russia, as well as Russian citizenship and easy access to the rest of Europe. As of November 2025, they're promising job seekers one-year service contracts that pay $2,500 a month, signing bonuses of between $24,630 and $37,000, and the possibility of citizenship for the job applicant and their families. It's also noted that, quote, while recruitment primarily targets men, it also reaches women, enticing them into positions in drone assembly and factory work. In 2024, reports started emerging from African countries like Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, Cameroon, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, in which men claimed they'd initially accepted scholarships or job offers in Russia. Once they arrived, the recruitment agents they'd been negotiating with confiscated and destroyed their passports, provided them with contracts and other documentation written entirely in Russian, and then ordered them to sign if they wanted a Russian passport. Afterwards, they were taken to military training camps where their phones were confiscated, and they were informed that they'd signed up to join the Russian military. If they refused, they were often beaten or had their lives threatened, and were told that they'd signed a contract and could not leave. According to Patrick Kwabe, a Kenyan national, quote, you need to escape or you die. There are only two ways. Now, according to the documentary Die for Putin, these foreign recruits often attend only up to a month of military training and are told that their safety can be guaranteed in exchange for a special payment.
A month is a lot more than we hear usually for the Russians.
And to fight
the Russian military.
$5,000. Afterwards, they're sent to the front lines, where they're ordered to conduct military operations with little or no support from their Russian commanders, who view them simply as expendable. According to one soldier who was interviewed, they'd all received a weapon and were ordered to guard a Russian outpost, but had no access to ammunition since it had reportedly been buried to keep it safe. Another soldier claims that they'd been provided with 4 AK-47s, 2 grenades, and some rations, and were then sent to scout enemy territory with no plan for their safe return. A Kenyan national named Endengu Endarua was filmed by a group of Russian soldiers who had strapped a landmine to his chest. In another video posted to VK, a Russian social media website similar to Facebook, a group of African men can be seen singing, with a Russian soldier commenting that these, quote, disposable ones would stop singing as soon as they arrived at the front lines. According to political scientist Dr. Yedje Karep, if you watch those videos filmed by Russian soldiers showing African or other non-European soldiers fighting alongside them, you see racist slurs all over. They really don't care if those guys survive or not. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Russian military seems to use these foreign recruits as cannon fodder.
It's one of the reasons that I've always found it so rich, the whole denazification of Ukraine claim, because Russians and Russia in general has been proven to be one of, if not the most racist land and group of people in the entire world. And this is something, if I don't know, if I find them, I'll show them here. But I was able to kind of look for some statistics on using Grok and ChatGPT and kind of learn about different countries, their crime rates based on, and statistics based on racially motivated ideology, stuff like that. And Russia was just top of the charts across the board. And they just don't care. I mean, they're very open about it.
The Russian army used to send teams of between 40 or 50 men to lay claim to a target at the start of the war. They're now conducting meat assaults to weaken the Ukrainian forces by sending large groups of Russian soldiers to storm Ukrainian strongholds. Teams of 2 disposables are sent in every direction to scout for drone activity or lure out groups of Ukrainian soldiers. According to one foreign recruit from Tajikistan, during his first operation, 6 men were sent out, 2 Arabs, 1 African, 2 Tajiks, 4 AK magazines each, 2 grenades, some rations. We set off at 4 a.m. FPV drones appeared overhead almost immediately. Once the locations of Ukrainian units had been revealed, several groups of Russian soldiers would attack the Ukrainians in relentless waves in an attempt to weaken their position, deplete their ammunition stores, and gain some ground. If the foreign nationals fall, their bodies are left to rot. If they live, they're often abandoned by their Russian commanders and forced to fend for themselves, and most of them end up surrendering to the Ukrainian military. Even then, it's often with the belief that they were going to be tortured or executed, since Russian command had repeatedly warned them that their lives would be forfeit if they were ever captured by the Ukrainian forces. According to the project I Want to Live, foreign recruits have a mortality rate as high as 42%, and 1 out of 5 foreign recruits typically dies within 4 months of arriving in Russia. Some of the survivors report that they'd seen dozens of other foreign recruits die.
I'm actually surprised the numbers are that moderate. I would have expected it to be more, especially with videos that we've seen where the average, well, I guess we're talking about foreigners, right? We're not talking about just Russian soldiers in general.
During military operations, or that some of them willingly shot themselves in the hand to avoid being sent to the front lines. As of yet, none of the African nationals who've been interviewed have reported actually receiving the money they'd been promised, and many of them have since gone missing. One of the most reliable sources of information that we have regarding Russia's underhanded recruitment tactics is the foreign recruits themselves. As of the time of writing, it's estimated that hundreds of foreign recruits from 48 different countries have been captured by the Ukrainian army and are currently being held as prisoners of war. Ukrainian authorities report that they're treated well and that they are complying with the requirements set out in the Geneva Convention. These prisoners also regularly assist Ukrainian authorities and other international bodies by agreeing to speak with the international media in an attempt to expose Russia's underhanded recruitment methods. These prisoners all consider themselves lucky to have been captured, and some explain that being imprisoned is preferable to being on the front lines. However, most of them insist that they'd only agreed to fight on Russia's behalf for the money. They fully believe that to receive the thousands of dollars they'd initially been promised, they have to return to Russia, since they were also promised Russian citizenship. The problem is, well, Russia doesn't want them back.
Here's I know I'm pausing it a lot, guys, but there's a lot of good stuff to talk about here. Here's the thing, in my opinion. if these foreigners agreed to a contract, whether they knew what the conditions of the military were like in Russia or not, they agreed to sign a contract to fight against Ukraine, knowing the circumstances of the war. So they knew what they were doing. Of course, they didn't know in what capacity they would be helping the Russians, but they knew it was a Russian contract in the Russian military. To me, I'm like, okay, you reap what you sow. I mean, it's FAFO, right? F around and find out. The perfect definition. These guys are like 20 grand. I could be a bad guy for 20 grand. Hell yeah. Go sign a contract. They're like, oh my God, it's terrible. Yeah, well, you should have thought about that before being a bad guy.
According to Ukrainian authorities, the Kremlin reportedly prioritizes the release of Russian-born soldiers and commanders. As such, the Ukrainian authorities are in active negotiations with several governments whose citizens are currently being held as prisoners of war. Some of the problems they face include the fact that these countries have provided safe passage for their own citizens, since Ukraine is considered a war zone, as well as valid travel documentation. This is often complicated by the fact that Russian authorities had confiscated their passports and other identifying documents, or by the simple fact that the country of origin had no idea these men had been conscripted into the Russian army, and thus aren't even aware that they need their help. Then there are the legal complications. In countries like Kyrgyzstan and South Africa, it is illegal to fight a war on behalf of another country. In some cases, these prisoners of war would be sent to their home country only to end up in another prison. What's more, the North Korean prisoners of war can never return to North Korea, since they would be executed for having been captured in the first place. In some cases, it is believed that the only way some of these prisoners would be allowed to return to their countries of origin is if the war comes to an end, which doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. So, the question becomes, what happens in the meantime? By May 2024, governments all over the world were receiving more and more reports from the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, letting them know that hundreds of their citizens were either currently fighting on behalf of Russia, had died during the war, or found themselves imprisoned in prisoner of war camps in Ukraine. In other cases, the families of these men were contacting their local officials to report that their sons and husbands had gone to Russia and were now missing. Human rights lawyers from all over the world started fighting for the release of these men, and in some cases their home countries were able to negotiate for their release. But the question remains, what are these countries doing to keep their citizens from falling into the same trap? In May 2024, India's Central Bureau of Investigation reported that they had been able to identify 35 men who had been offered lucrative jobs and admission to a Russian university, only to find themselves fighting on the front lines. These men had been approached by 4 Indian nationals who organized their move to Russia and who were subsequently arrested on charges of human trafficking. India has since requested that Russia no longer recruit Indian citizens into the Russian military, and they are still actively working to secure the release of Indian nationals who are still fighting on behalf of Russia. The Indian authorities have also warned their citizens against accepting jobs or other economic opportunities in Russia. Nepal, on the other hand, has stopped issuing work permits for its citizens who want to travel to either Russia or Ukraine. In December 2023, Reuters reported that the Nepalese government was in active discussions with Russian authorities to release its citizens who were still enlisted in the Russian army.
Here's another way. Here's another way to mitigate this issue. Educate your people. If you're able to broadcast the truth of the war, you won't have people signing these bogus contracts, right? You can fight it from a different perspective without just urging Russia, Mr. Putin, please don't take our stupid people. Please don't take our stupids. No, dude. Make your stupids smarter.
Who were also demanding the return of the bodies of 6 of their citizens who had been confirmed as dead, as well as compensation that their families were owed as part of their military contract. In Kenya, authorities have reportedly identified rogue recruitment agencies and individuals who claim they were responsible for luring more than 1,000 Kenyans into accepting scholarships or work opportunities in Russia in an attempt to safeguard their population. Kenya's Foreign Minister, Musalia Mudavadi, has reportedly also been in talks with Russia's foreign minister in an attempt to convince the Kremlin to agree not to enlist Kenyan nationals into Russia's army, and has banned its citizens from enlisting in any foreign military. Ghana has reported that an estimated 272 men have been lured to Russia, and 55 of them have been confirmed dead. Ghana is currently in talks with Ukraine in an attempt to protect the rest of its citizens and secure the release of Ghanaian prisoners of war. They've also
Hey, you put on that Russian camouflage, man, you're a target. That's it. Yeah, you're not. Nobody's going to differentiate based on your skin color. The Ukrainians aren't going to be like, well, that's a black Russian, so he might be from Africa, so we're going to save him. No, dude.
approached Russian authorities to discuss the return of any and all Ghanaians who are still on the front lines. In South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa has reportedly been successful in arranging the release of 15 South African men who had been lured to Russia on the pretense that they were going to receive training to become bodyguards, while 2 have remained. The South African authorities have since declared that the persons responsible for recruiting these men are under investigation, since it is illegal for any South African citizen to join a foreign military without first obtaining government approval. And yet, the main problem that all these countries face is the fact that the people recruiting their citizens on behalf of Russia are not using official channels such as immigration officers or government agencies. Instead, they're bypassing official channels through bribery and corruption and can have their victims on a plane to Russia within days, promising them lucrative salaries and Russian citizenship without their country of origin being any wiser. As such, Ukraine is reporting that people from countries like Cameroon and Sierra Leone are being duped by these foreign agents. In May 2026, the Ukrainian Ministry for Foreign Affairs at the Ukrainian Coordination Headquarters for the Treatment of Prisoners of War established a website called StopRussianRecruiters.org. Their mission is to, quote, document and publicize unlawful and deceptive recruitment practices of the Russian Ministry of Defense, which intensified significantly following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Along with the I Want to Live project, they're not only encouraging Russian soldiers and foreign recruiters to surrender, but they also provide a way for the public to find missing family members, help someone escape, or share any information they might have about the methods Russian authorities are using to lure foreign recruits into signing up for the Russian military. And in June 2026, they reported that people from more than 100 countries had already paid a visit to the website. But what has...
And I think it's also important to recognize that's not Ukraine's or the Ukrainian government or the Ukrainian military's responsibility. That is, at the end of the day, it's the nation that they're coming from. It's their responsibility. And if they want to blame anyone, they need to blame Russia and ask them, like we're seeing some of them do, say, stop recruiting our people. But at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the country. For example, if Americans go and fight for Russia, everybody knows that American is just retarded and he knows exactly what he's getting into, more or less. Maybe not this specific, like really detailed stuff, but we know he is educated enough via the information that he has full access to on the internet and media that he can make an educated decision to, if he wants to fight, he could join Ukraine or he can join Russia. That guy joined Russia. Okay, that's on him, man. That's you can't blame anybody else for that.
Russia's response been to all...
So my point is, you can't. The responsibility solely falls on the nation for not educating their population or for pushing the wrong narrative for so many years. For example, if they have been Russian sympathizing countries, no wonder your population wants to go help Russia, because your country's been basically saying, hey, we like Russia for the last multiple years.
All of the negative publicity regarding their recruitment schemes and the allegations that Russia's Federal Security Service is engaging in human trafficking to feed its war machine. Russian officials are, of course, denying the claims made by the international media that they're employing methods like deception and coercion to trick foreign nationals into fighting on the front lines. They have repeatedly stated that all of the members of their army are there voluntarily, and that Russian authorities have never, quote, engaged in illegal recruitment of foreign citizens in the armed forces of the Russian Federation. They've also repeatedly denied any knowledge of independent brokers and agents who are recruiting foreign citizens on behalf of Russia's military or its Federal Security Service, and have refused to assist international investigative agencies who'd expressed an interest in investigating these independent brokers and their links to the Russian military. According to Russian authorities, quoting again, foreign nationals are permitted under Russian law to voluntarily enlist in the armed forces if they are legally present in Russia and choose to do so. As proof, Russian commanders often supply the international media with recordings of foreign recruits chanting oaths in Russian, during which they are expressing their willingness to die on behalf of the Russian Federation. Recruitment videos circulating online also include recordings of men from countries like Kyrgyzstan explaining that they'd happily signed up to join the military in return for a whole plethora of benefits, and that they want their family members to know that they're safe. The Russian authorities...
Hey, and maybe they're true. If we give them the Russian military the benefit of the doubt, maybe those claims are true and these foreigners are okay being there. But what we know for a fact is they have not gone to the front line yet. If they're making those claims, it's possible that the Russians are kind of grooming some foreigners to make it, and then recording them to make these foreigners kind of the mouthpiece of the foreigner the volunteer soldiers, right? Like, so they could say, "Hey, look at these guys. They love it. They love it here in Russia," right? But that's not the reality. Everybody knows that. Well, not everybody knows that, apparently.
Have also repeatedly stated that the ongoing claims that they're engaging in human trafficking are nothing more than a dangerous and misleading propaganda campaign by both Ukraine and the international media, who are doing their best to portray Russia negatively in the global south. And yet, as soon as they received requests from several African nations to halt the recruitment of their citizens in March 2026, the Russian military reportedly rushed their training and deployed all of the African nationals to the front lines in the Donbass region within days. It's thought that this was an attempt by the Kremlin to plausibly deny that any African nationals were actively being trained for deployment. That same month, Russia also fast-tracked a law that would prevent the repatriation or extradition of qualifying foreign nationals who are serving or have served under contract in the Russian armed forces. They claim that this is an attempt to keep their foreign army veterans from facing prosecution or even death if they were to be sent back to their home countries. And in November 2025, Russia went a step further when they signed Decree number 821, which now requires foreign nationals who are living in Russia to agree to sign a one-year contract with the military in exchange for Russian citizenship. What's more, they've started to target certain groups of migrants by labeling their religious practices as extremism and threats to security, which can lead to them and their families being deported. According to the Foreign Policy Research Institute, this new policy is, quote, increasing pressure on them to find legal security through military service. Despite the fact that no international court has yet found that Russia is, in fact, engaging in human trafficking, it's no longer a matter of speculation or debate. Thanks to persistent coverage by the international media, it is now a documented fact that Russia has been engaging in a global human trafficking scheme that targets vulnerable individuals through coercion or deception. Russia has proved time and again that it will go to extraordinary lengths to win ground in the battle against Ukraine, regardless of the diplomatic fallout. For international governments, the challenge is no longer just tracking missing citizens, but aggressively dismantling the underground network of rogue agencies before vulnerable job seekers ever board a plane. Until that pipeline is fully severed, the Kremlin will continue to feed its machine with the lives of men whose only goal was to escape poverty. Thank
Hmm. Hey, great video. Into the Shadows, you guys. Check him out. I will definitely wait. Let's definitely subscribe here. This is cool. He definitely seems really educated and like he does his homework on this stuff. Um, Again, I have a different take on some of the things. He comes from a more a perspective of they're all victims, which is okay. I definitely understand that, and I do believe there is a percentage of these volunteer fighting foreigners that are definitely victims, especially if they have been in poverty and they get a job, for example, to work in the oil fields in Russia, for example, and they sign this contract. They're like, "Let's go," and I'm gonna break this generational curse of poverty for my family. And then this dude from Kenya ends up getting shipped to the front line. I get that, right? But for the guys who knowingly signed a Russian military contract, whether that be for an assault position or a chef in Moscow, they signed a military contract for Russia. Yeah, that's what you get, bud. So that's my take. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I love you, and we'll see you in the next one.